Next on KQED Newsroom, tackling football's concussion crisis as Super Bowl weekend kicks off. Plus, a new approach to ending homelessness in San Francisco.
You can't arrest your way out of homelessness.
And what this device is teaching scientists about elephant seals.
Welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Today, the Commissioner of the National Football League, Roger Goodell, promised the NFL would do more to protect players.
And we are establishing the position of a chief medical officer. This individual, who we expect to have in place very soon, will oversee our medical-related policies.
Over the past year, a series of investigative reports revealed the extent to which the NFL had tried to deny the link between football and brain damage. Questions about the sport's safety and its future are looming over this weekend's Super Bowl. Half of all Americans now say they don't want their children playing football. Scott Shafer is here to discuss those questions with a former 49er, a high school football coach, and an investigative reporter with ESPN.
Joining me now to discuss football's concussion crisis are ESPN sports writer Mark Fainaru-Wada. He's co-author of League of Denial, which exposed the NFL's efforts to deny the long-term impacts of concussions. Dwight Hicks, a former All-Pro defensive player who helped the San Francisco 49ers win 2 Super Bowls. Dwight is starring in a new play at the Berkeley Rep called X's and O's, a football love story. And Patrick Walsh, head football coach at Serra High School. He forfeited a consolation game last month rather than risk injuries to his players. Gentlemen, welcome all of you.
Thank you.
Mark, let me begin with you. The NFL said this week that concussions were down 25% this year compared to last year. Does that mean, do you think, that the NFL is doing a better job of protecting its players?
Well, I mean, I'll say this at the start. I think my brother and I, we did the work together at ESPN. You know, we did a story a couple of years ago looking at the league's sort of data on concussions and their claims of reductions 2 years ago. And at that point, I think it was almost impossible to make sense of the numbers that they were throwing out. There was such a mishmash of the way teams were reporting these injuries. There was a mishmash in the terminology. The league itself was giving us entirely different numbers. One week we got one set of numbers, another week we got another set. So I take what they say with a grain of salt based on that kind of history. And then the difficulty in sort of reporting these kinds of injuries as well. And then we see injuries happening on the field that people wonder about that are not reported as concussions. Russell Wilson, Roethlisberger. So, I think everybody has to sort of have some context of what those numbers actually mean.
And Commissioner Goodell, Roger Goodell, announced that the league is going to be hiring a new medical officer, a chief medical officer. Based on what you know, what do you make of that?
Well, it's an interesting thing because to this point, their main medical guy has been this guy, Elliot Pellman. And Elliot Pellman is sort of at the core of our book and the reporting on the sort of the league's denial for years. And I think people were always struck that Elliot Pellman, despite being at the sort of root of the NFL's denial of this issue for decades, was still a major player in the medical sort of field around the NFL. And so the league stating now publicly that they're going to go, I guess, in a different direction. I assume that he would rereplace Pellman or whoever's there. So I think it remains to be seen.
There'll be a lot of scrutiny on whoever that is.
Absolutely.
Dwight Hicks, you got a Super Bowl ring that you're wearing today. Yes. You played a number of seasons in the pros. Is it possible to make pro football safe?
In some respects, yes, and others, no. Football is a very violent game, very competitive game, and it's getting faster. The guys are getting bigger, and I don't think that the equipment that they're using is keeping up with that. And I think a lot of attention should be towards that, at better helmet technology. I think more than anything, people look at the big impacts, and it's more the subconcussive hits that are really doing the damage.
The ones that don't really take you out of a game necessarily.
Absolutely. I can remember playing in New England one year. I played half the game, or more than 3/4 of the game, and I was like on automatic pilot. And the thing about that is I looked at the game to see where that could have happened, And I didn't see anything that caused it. And it could have happened the game before, and just a slight jolt then triggered something in that game. And I was on automatic pilot. I did not see a neurologist that Monday, came back and just kept going. But now they have more information. So hopefully, I would like to think that the NFL is going to really start to address some of these issues.
Patrick Walsh, what are you seeing at the Little League level in terms of how all this concern about concussions has trickled down in terms of coaching, training, parents, and the players, of course?
Well, you know, health and safety of our players is on our minds every single day. And really the thing about concussions is that they're the most insidious injury. We have a doctor come in every single year to educate our team. Most of the time, the people who see the concussive effects are the players themselves in a huddle. So those kids need to be trained to alert the coaching staff and the medical staff on the sideline that something indeed has happened in the game. Because the kids in that time aren't necessarily making a decision. You know, when you break your arm, it's very clear that an injury has happened. When you have a concussion, and to Dwight's point here, I got a concussion against Fairfield High School when I was at De La Salle, and I don't remember the second half.
But you played.
Oh, I played and actually played well. Yeah. I remember looking back, sitting in what happened in that second half. So, and thankfully we won the game. But that's the thing; it's insidious.
Yeah. So you recently made a lot of news. You forfeited a consolation game, a kind of a meaningless game, because you were concerned about your players' safety. You didn't want to risk injury for a meaningless game. What was your thinking in that?
It was a lot went into that. It was a culmination of a 2-week period of playing consolation football games, and just basically on the morning of December 5th, which is the morning of the game, through all the events throughout the 2 weeks that we played in these events, which no longer exists anymore, was basically sitting there that morning and asking myself, was it worth it to put that team that I had at that time on the field that night? And consciously, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't look those parents in the eye, couldn't look those kids in the eye and put them in the bus. It was very difficult.
What did the kids say?
They felt relieved, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I had parents thanking me. It was a very, very, a very traumatic time. I delivered the message to the team in tears in our chapel. It was a very difficult decision because every fiber in my being is a competitor. I've never forfeited anything in my entire life. But I was thinking about these kids, and really what was a turning point for me was, what if I had to go visit a kid in the hospital that night, which I've had to do? What if I had to tell a parent that they got a concussion? What if I had to tell a kid that? And that was a turning point for me.
But you could say that about any game, really, right?
Absolutely. The playoffs, we were talking about earlier, Dwight, the playoffs, the definition of a playoff is a series of contests that leads to a championship. Correct. And that's where things got interesting, if you will, to say the least, because the consolation bracket no longer led to a championship. So it was challenging for everybody involved.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark.
I was going to say, one of the things that struck me as I looked at what Patrick did and the power of it, and it was a courageous act given sort of the mentality around football and the sort of belief of we're just going to play, this is what we do. But I started looking around the country at, I think what's instructive about what these guys are going through is, yes, these were consolation games, but when you look at the length of the season now that's happening in high school football, you're talking about, I was looking at in the state of Texas, for example, huge football in Texas, obviously, right? The two largest teams that played for the championship this year played a 16-game season. They played an NFL season, basically, to reach the championship with a 2-week break over a 4-month period. These are high school kids. And this is sort of the extent where we're going. The situation Patrick found himself in was extreme because you had consolation games. But this is happening in states around the country.
Yeah. Dwight, you're in a play that really focuses on concussions and the impact on players, families, coaches. And like any actor, I would imagine there are nights when you sort of fumble for your lines a little bit. But does it take on, maybe once in a while, does it
theater,
take on,
of course.
It's theater, it's live. But does it take on additional significance for you, given that the topic and the fact that you might be concerned personally about some of those early warning signs?
Yes, it is very dear to me because I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I played the game. I played it on the highest level. There is some kind of residual effect that you get from playing this game. But the game has given me a lot. We didn't know as far as when I played, what we know now about head trauma and how much rest that we need as far as after suffering a concussion. There is some information saying that they knew in 1937. I think this is what our play is addressing. And for the NFL to skate along a tightrope and say that there's no correlation, I think we have to be more, admit that there is a problem, and let's do something about it instead of denying.
Mark, what's the biggest fear for the NFL? I mean, clearly they're taking some steps. They're being dragged really into taking some steps to protect players, but they're also concerned about the Little League and moms and dads being concerned about this whole issue and maybe not wanting their kids to play football. What's at stake?
Well, I think what's most instructive to look at with the league and the way they deal with this, how they've marketed the whole issue, right? I mean, the league has gone from marketing itself as all about violence. For years, the league just marketed violence. That was what brought everybody in. And as they began to have to confront this issue, which became unavoidable as you saw parents beginning to pull away from letting their kids play Pop Warner. I mean, we reported on a decline of 10% over the past 2 years. So the league now has shifted the way it's marketing itself, and you see itself marketing to safety. So it's set up these moms clinics, right, which I think some people look at as a positive thing because they're instructing mothers and parents about the dangers of the sport. Other people look at it as a completely marketing tool by the league to try and sell the idea that the sport can be safe. And as Dwight says, it's a violent sport. The sport is rooted in its violence, and frankly, that's what most of us love about it.
Yeah. Patrick, there's a new state law now that limits the number of days a week that kids can have contact practices. Is that a solution? What impact is that going to have?
Well, it's 90 minutes, 2 90-minute full contact practices a week. And I think it's very prudent, and I think we can't be tone deaf in this society right now as football coaches in high school and below. We have to listen to what's happening out there, and we got to put the kids first. And I believe in this legislation. I believe that the game can be practiced without pads on. I believe the way you can tackle with shoulder leverage type tackling and different types of techniques and tackling bags instead of people, and these sort of things that are things that we are conscious of and that we need to be more conscious of as we move forward. I love this game. This game has changed my life. I know it has for you, and I see how this game impacts kids and gets into their souls, and we need to save this game.
So if a parent comes to you, I know you have 2 young sons. Do you want them to play football? What do you tell a parent when they ask you?
Yeah, great question. I have the 3 denial rule, and really what that tests is desire. Kids that don't have a strong desire to play this game, they're playing for the wrong reasons, have a tendency to be the most injured, but it takes a really, really distinct motivation to play this game. So I tell them, first time my kids come to me and say, Dad, can I play? I'm going to say, no, you're not ready. Second time, you're not ready. Third time, Dad, I want to play. I want to see him beg me to play. Then I'll let him play at any age.
Yeah, all right.
That's
Patrick,
my deal. Yeah.
We're going to leave it at there.
Thank you.
Patrick Walsh, Dwight Hicks, Mark Fainaru-Wada, thank you all very much for this important discussion.
Thank you very much.
For having us.
Thank you.
We're now going to discuss one of the Bay Area's toughest problems, homelessness. Despite decades of efforts and billions of dollars, thousands of people are still living on the streets. San Francisco is about to open a one-stop service center aimed at helping the chronically homeless. The mayor's point man on homelessness, Bevan Dufty, is here to discuss the new program. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, how will this one-stop center work, and how is it different from initiatives in other cities?
Well, let's just think about the fact you can see a police officer, let's say, talking to a homeless individual who might have a shopping cart or a tent and possessions or an outreach worker. That individual's not going to be able to go to shelter. The 3 big things that prevent people from accessing our shelter system is possessions, partners, or pets. And so what we're really trying to do with the Navigation Center is to reach out to the long-term homeless who've been in encampments in and around our neighborhoods and on the street, and sort of take away all the reasons that shelter might not work. The Navigation Center is only going to be for stays of 3 to 10 days. We'll only have 75 people there at any given time, but we'll make it simple that people can bring their dogs. If their possessions, we'll be able to store them and let them curate and go through their things.
So basically allowing the whole encampment to move in.
Absolutely. We're going to have 6 bungalows for sleeping and then a couple for services and a meal bungalow. And so we'll be able to take an encampment of 10, 12, 14 people and bring them together. It's something we did a year and a half ago when a fence was put up at 5th and King under the freeway, and we moved 30 people together to a church, and we recognized that that community had strengths. They've been looking out for one another, taking care of one another, and bringing them together made it so much easier.
And what will be the metric for success here?
That's a great question. Our city controller, who's our city services auditor, is working not to look retrospectively 2 years from now, but on a real-time basis. They're helping us ask for the metrics, the questions, what success is going to look like. Obviously, it's going to be helping people who've been on the street a long time, moving these encampments, getting people inside, getting them to access treatment, housing. The mayor is leading this initiative. He's gone to the private sector to have them contribute and participate in it. The mayor has also said we're going to ramp up the leasing of 500 single-room occupancy hotels, known as SROs, housing placements for people. It's a very exciting time for us because we're going to do something different and people are ready for a change.
And they're all important efforts, yet the problem persists. 500 units of housing doesn't even really begin to address all of the housing that you will need. And in fact, the city currently spends about $170 million per year on serving the homeless, and that's about $500,000 a day. That's more than the Department of Children, Youth, and their families. And yet, no dent has been made. Why is that?
Well, we have housed over 9,000 people over the past 10 years, and one of the programs we're proud of is called Homeward Bound. Over the past 7.5 years, we've enabled 8,600 people to return to family, friends, and loved ones, and we contact them. We assure that they will be taken care of. We get them a Trailways ticket and a meal voucher, and only 24 of that 8,600 have come back into our system. So we can't solve the nation's homelessness problem, and the $170 million that we spend, that's a safety net for people that are poor and low income. And so we've made a lot of gains, but I think the street population has been one of the most challenging issues, and the Navigation Center is really, I think, a new answer, very different than anything we've seen.
And the numbers that you mentioned, there have been some gains made in certain segments of the population, but the reality is that the numbers haven't changed much. I mean, according to the mayor's own office, the homeless population in 2009 was 6,514. In 2013, it was 6,436. It hasn't changed much. I mean, it's stayed pretty much the same.
Let's talk where it has changed. Veterans. So President Obama set the goal of ending chronic veterans homelessness by the end of this year and ending veterans homelessness next year. So the federal government's giving us resources, and we've reduced veterans homelessness in 2 years by 35%. As our numbers have not changed, our most recent number was 6,436. Santa Clara has gone up 8%. Los Angeles has gone up 15%, and New York has gone up 13% in homelessness. Everybody knows that the recession has hit us. But the mayor stepped forward and look at what happened to unemployment. It went from a 9.4% unemployment to 4.4%. All of my people that I work for, certainly they're not accessing jobs as others are, but we're moving in the right direction. And you're seeing Google gave $2 million through the mayor to homeless services a month ago, and I think that's what's going to change things in San Francisco.
Are you hoping that more high-tech companies will step up?
Absolutely. I think they want to help, and they recognize that they have a part. They can help on the ground. They can provide technology and volunteers, and I've seen that happen more and more. But I think that the resources, they realize the city can't solve this problem on our own. And I think San Franciscans are tired of seeing people pushed around by the police or street cleaners. You can't arrest your way out of homelessness.
Bevan, when you walk the streets of San Francisco, how do you react to the homeless? Do you give money to panhandlers?
I do. I do. And I start a conversation, I give them my business card, and I try and connect to the humanity of people that are on the street. It may not work for everyone, and not everyone who panhandles is homeless.
You're not concerned the money will be used for drugs or alcohol? That is a concern by a lot of people. They want to have compassion, but they don't know where that money is going.
I haven't sat in a room where I've talked about homelessness in this job where people don't generate income for drugs or alcohol. Let's just be honest. People are people. I don't judge people. I think the issue is that we've made it hard. There's not enough affordable housing in San Francisco. Sometimes the rules of our programs, as I described, not being able to have possessions with you, not being a male and a female can't stay together in our shelter system. What couple is going to allow that to be separated like that? So I think we've really figured out what hasn't worked, and that's what the Navigation Center is going to do. And I think that the private sector may get excited if they see us gain ground.
A final question for you, just real quickly. The city conducted its homeless count last night. The results won't be known until later this year. But are you hopeful about the homeless count? Should people have reason to be hopeful?
I think what people want to see is a change on the street. I think people want to see that that person with 3 shopping carts and a dog is not going to just get cited by the police or get pushed. That's what the change is going to be. The numbers will be the numbers, but I think the reality is that we want people to know that we're here to keep faith and we're going to do something radically different, and the mayor's committed to making this change.
All right, Bevan, much luck to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Every winter, thousands of northern elephant seals storm the beaches of Año Nuevo State Park, a jagged stretch of coastline 60 miles south of San Francisco. A century ago, the massive marine mammals were on the verge of extinction, but after Mexico and the United States enacted hunting bans, the seal population began to recover. Now, new technologies are giving scientists a way to track that recovery. Scott Shafer spoke with UC Santa Cruz biology professor Dan Costa about what researchers are learning.
Dan Costa, this is a perfect time of the year to go down to Año Nuevo and watch the elephant seals. Why should people go?
It's an opportunity to see I always think of Año Nuevo and elephant seals as one of the 7 wonders of the world. There's very few places in the world that you can go to such a, to a major metropolis and see these animals breeding on the beach. They're the largest seal. They're doing everything right in front of you. They give birth to a pup. The males fight for dominance on the rookery, and then they mate with the females. And you can just go see it. Just take a half a day, a full day, and go down there and see it all happening.
And these are big animals. How big? Give us a comparison.
They're almost 5,000 pounds, so they're the size of a small car. And the females are about a little over 1,000 pounds. The males are about 4,000, 5,000 pounds. So these are big animals. They're the biggest seal. So they're quite large. They're pretty docile, actually. And when you see them sitting on the beach, they really don't care about people much.
Except when they're mating, right?
Except when they're mating. So the males fight, and the females really protect their pup. But they don't really care that much about the people. So you can go, you're not allowed to go very close to them, but you can go and see them, and they really don't care about what the people are doing. They're really into what they're there for.
Yeah. So you've been studying elephant seals for over 3 decades now.
Yep.
How has technology changed what you're able to do and the way you go about it?
Well, this device measures what the animal's doing. It measures its diving pattern, how deep it dives, how long it dives. It transmits that information via satellite. So there's a satellite that'll recover the information. This measures the temperature of the water and the salinity of the water. And this thing here measures the fluorometry, which gives us chlorophyll, which is the phytoplankton. So this tag tells us what the animal's doing, but it also tells us about the environment. It tells us in the ocean, the things that determine the habitat are things like salinity, temperature, and phytoplankton. So,
and is it going to come back to Año Nuevo with that still on?
Hopefully. These are expensive tags. This is about $8,000 worth of electronics. If it doesn't come back, all that information is relayed via satellite.
Yeah.
So,
and how do you get it on the animal? You have to sedate them?
Yeah, they're very docile animals, but they really would object to us walking up to them and taking blood samples and the like. This is one that's already been deployed on the animal. You can see it used 5-minute epoxy. And put a little neoprene patch on here so that we glue it to the animal's head, and then when we recover it, we just cut through that neoprene patch and pull the tag off.
And what has having this enabled you to learn about their migration patterns, what they're eating, where they are, what they're doing?
It's pretty phenomenal. I mean, when we first thought about putting tags out, and some of the tags we used were nowhere near as sophisticated as this, we didn't have any idea where they went. In fact, we couldn't figure out why when we do aerial surveys or boat-based surveys, we didn't see that many animals. And the reason we didn't see them is because they leave this area. They go way out to the international date line, way up to the Gulf of Alaska. And when they're at sea, they spend 80 to 90% of their time underwater. So these animals are diving routinely 20 to 25 minutes with only about 2 to 3 minutes at the surface.
And this is a real comeback story, too, because 100 years or so ago, elephant seals were nearly extinct. I mean, there were very few left, and now there are, what, tens of thousands?
In 1900, there were probably less than 50 elephant seals. And it was an expedition in the 1890s that went to Guadalupe Island and found 12 animals. And back then, if you saw an animal you thought was extinct, you shoot it to put it in a museum. Fortunately, not all the animals were on the beach that day, and so we estimate that there was less than 25 or so. It could be that all the animals we have today have one father.
Wow.
There's about 210,000 northern elephant seals, so that's an amazing recovery.
It's a lot of mating.
A lot of mating. They were endangered because they were hunted for their oil. So everybody thinks about whaling and going after whale oil. Well, they also went after elephant seals, and a lot of the whaling ships, when they got near to being full, would stop on an elephant seal colony. And as I said, these animals are docile, so they'd whack them over the head and then render the oil. And so they were hunted for their oil, and they were.
And of course, nowadays, climate change is a huge concern for all marine life. Is it affecting elephant seals in a particular way, including their migration patterns?
That's one of the things we're really interested in. We've been putting a lot of tags out, 20 tags every cycle on elephant seal females for the last 10 years. And our goal is to be able to see if these patterns are changing. So as the climate changes, how are elephant seals going to respond? Our first gut reaction is that elephant seals are covering such a large swath of the ocean that they'll probably be able to change as the ocean changes. So if the primary habitat moves a little further north, the elephant seals will possibly move a little further north.
All right, so hopeful. You're not
hopeful.
Not threatened by other things and not being hunted anymore. So
not being hunted and very few, there's no fishery for these deep ocean squid and fishes that elephant seals feed on. So their food resource is also pretty safe, at least for the time being.
All right, guys, a little bit of good environmental news.
The elephant seals are a great story that there is hope, and an animal that was literally teetering on the brink of extinction is almost fully recovered.
All right, Dan Costa, professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at UC Santa Cruz. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, you're welcome.
The elephant seals will be at Año Nuevo until March. Reservations for guided tours are required. You can find out more on our website at kqed.org/newsroom. And a program note, next week, the mayors of San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland will join us to discuss the most pressing issues facing their cities. If you have a question you'd like us to ask the mayors, please send it to kqed.newsroom@kqed.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Thuy Vu. Have a good night.
Support for programming is provided by these generous contributors.